Welcome, Philip.
Hi. So, Robert, check the sound. So I will introduce myself now for the sound check. My name is Philip Nadrapuyo. I work for ORFOT since 15 and a half years now, so quite a long time there. You find me on Twitter as Boutique is my handle. And I will talk today about our coronavirus dashboard and everything which is around this monster. You saw the screenshot from Felix before. It's quite a long site, actually. A short outline. I will first give a short introduction about the coronavirus data, which you can all use and make funny things out of it if you want to. About our data pipelines. Then how our coronavirus dashboard, which is internally named View Corona, is built of, and how we widgetized various components out of it. So this is the dashboard, as you might already have seen in your daily news usage. At the peak of the pandemic, it had around 500,000 page impressions per day. Now it's a little bit lower, but still very good visited at the moment. And this is just a standalone version of it. We also have this embeds for the stories, and this is the more interesting part because our journalists can use all the graphics from the dashboard and embed it into their stories and tell more about the data because most of the time it needs a little bit of explanation. Where is the data from? And you can download it too if you want. It's mostly open data, and you find it at data.gv.at. This is the data.gv.at is the official open data portal of Austria, and they provide you data about vaccinations. And the BMS GPK is the Austrian Health Ministry, which has quite a long abbreviation, but yeah. After 2 years, I know it even during sleep. They provide the vaccination data. They also provide data about the coronavirus, the corona certificates, the checks, how many people have a valid certificate. Then there are two interesting things, and there is a warning sign because avoid them if you can. These are the Morgenmeldung, the morning report from the Ministry of Interior in Austria and from the Health Ministry. And these are more or less raw data. And it's a little bit dangerous if you don't know what's going on there because sometimes they report bullshit and then you have to sort this out. Or they do crazy things which you never would expect to happen. The more reliable source is from Argus, and that's the bad thing, it comes in the afternoon, early in the afternoon. So most of the journalists try to make something out of the raw data before waiting to the afternoon for the controlled and checked data from Argus. You also have this coronavirus Ampel, which is not very useful at the moment, but maybe it comes again during summer. And you also have this reproduction number published every Friday. And one problem which happened exactly 1 week ago, the Austrian Ministry of Health reported 3,100 death cases. After the cases were distributed in reality over the last 2 years, but since they reported it on 1 day, we have a huge spike if you don't import the data in the right format. And on the left side, you see our world in data, and the problem is this is the international #1 source for comparing nations and how nations and states deal with the pandemic. And we look terrible in the coronavirus death, if you see that in the last week, because this down there is Germany and Austria normally, and we are now way up. The correct form would be this one. So that's one of the challenges we have. We have to clean up the data, bring it in the right format, and don't make data struggles, hide them from our users. How do we do this? So in the middle of everything is Ringojs, which is the central hub and generates and transforms everything. We just download the raw data from the official sources, checksum them, and if the checksums change, give it to our Ringo scripts and application. And this are quite complex script after 2 years, but they do a lot of heavy number crunching, transforming everything, dropping columns you don't need, optimizing the data, compacting it so that we don't send out even more data to our browsers than we need to. And at the end, we just simply pack everything together with, again, a set of scripts, compress them, and we have a static file cluster. It's pretty simple. DNS round robin, and the browsers just grab the final JSON and CSV files. We try to deliver most of the stuff as transformed JSONs, even if the incoming raw data is 99% CSVs. Why do we use such an exotic thing like Ringojs for this? Because I think nobody here in the room has ever used it, except my team and colleagues. But we have quite a long knowledge about this stack and this runtime, so we know every facet of it, and we can really deal with problems. And that makes it the #1 choice, because if a lot of people know the details, you can also handle troubles and problematic situations easier. It's based on the JVM, which is a pretty solid platform to build up on. It's multi-threaded JavaScript, which is still pretty special. I think we are the only runtime in the world which still does multi-threaded JavaScript in that way on the JVM. But it works. It's very solid. As long as you keep everything isolated, then threads are no problem. And the Jvm Memory model makes it easy to pump in new memory in the heap. So we just launch complex scripts with 2 or 4 gigabytes of memory, and they can be instantly used by the scripts. And we don't have to. I know Node got a lot better in the last 2 years on the memory side, and especially in the large memory space. But we have this since 10 or 15 years without any problems. And a good reason to use Ringo for us is that we have the access to the full Java enterprise libraries. And if you use GeoTools, and we have our own OpenStreetMap stack, and all the Spring and Apache Commons libraries, this is really useful. If you, we have to make our stuff very quick and accurate, but nobody cares how the code looks, or not a lot of people care how the code looks like. And because if the story is out, our job is mostly done on the data stuff. And that's why this really helps us to just bring in some Java library, all the heavy stuff, give it to Java. The dashboard itself in the front end is based on Vue.js, as Felix already said. We just use the standard stack with Vue 2, Vuex, and Vue Router, but it has grown to 67 components now, and we use for graphing Plotly, which is a quite nice high-level library to create graphs, and it's based on D3, like every graphing library in JavaScript, more or less. And we do the maps with Leaflet and our own OpenStreetMap stack. As I said before, it's not so important that everything is perfect, as long as our users get the right story with the right information. But we still care about using their resources. So one of the problems in this on the dashboard is that it is extremely memory expensive, because we now have 2 years of pandemic data loaded if you go on the site, and if you click on every tab, we use up over 100 megabytes of memory from the user browser. it still works on old Android devices. The big problem are always old Android tablets. And if you have such a user base like we have, you have a lot of old Android tablets. But still, it works very smooth for such old browsers and devices. And what I really care about is the row in the middle, the Cases tab, which is the main tab which 80% of the users visit, has just a memory usage of 20%, and we really try to optimize this tab and the graphics in this tab for performance, and not the rest, because if somebody wants to look up the European data, it's so special interest and it's so not a lot of traffic going on there, so they can wait for 3 seconds to load. And the vaccinations tab has very detailed data on Gemeinde level, municipalities, and that's why it loads so much more memory than the normal Cases tab, and it also loads more data. But still, the vaccinations are not at the best performance right now, so the people are not so interested in them, and that makes it not a big problem for us. As you see, the Lighthouse score is poor, but we implemented at least most of the best practices. And the Lighthouse score is, if you dig deeper, then it makes a lot more sense why it's so poor. And the reason is Plotly and graphing such high amount of data. It's extremely high amount of DOM elements hanging around in the DOM, and this is very bad for your performance score. But what can you do to improve the performance? The most important thing is if we load in the data and we put it in the Vuex store, just freeze it. It's not reactive. It's not interactive data which comes in. So if you can, freeze the data even if you put it in the store. This is the #1 and easiest performance improvement you can do. Convert everything to JSON you can. JSON is so much easier to parse for browsers, obviously, but still, we see a lot of people just using the raw CSV files. And pre-compress with Brotli instead of gzip, and just use gzip as a fallback. And one of the most important things, but very hard to do it at that scale, is the leverage browser caching as much as you can. Browser caching is really, really hard if you want to do it at scale and do it right. So let's dive a little bit more into the Vue application. So on the one hand, you have the Vue application, which renders the single point application, which also Felix showed before. And this is the standard way we started to develop the thing. But then a second way came, and this was the widget path, which is now the way where the most users see our graphics, because we embed it it can be embedded in every of our news sites, and we have a lot of news sites and a lot of people working on stories day by day. Just imagine every state in Austria has one Landesstudio for its own. And what's the goal of this widgetizing? So display every component of the single page app in a standalone mode and make it easily embeddable via just a script tag, like you know from all the embed stuff. And one very important thing for us is always load the latest version, because if the incoming data is producing not so nice outputs, we always want to react as fast as possible on these data problems. So it should look like this, and just put in a script tag, deferred loading, so that we don't block the rest of the news story to build up with CSS and styles and the rest of the JavaScript. And then we have 2 parameters. One is which component to render, and the area key is which state. We have 9 states, plus state key 10 is Austria, if you want the Austrian level. And for this, it's very useful to look at the special built-in elements of Vue. And slots are very common to use. And I think everyone who used Vue has used slots. But less known is the dynamic meta component. And this is where the magic happens of the widgetization. So you have this meta component with the is property, and the is property just binds you to a real component. And at runtime, this meta component will just be replaced with the one you defined in the is property. So what do we need to create such a widget out of our single-page application? The first thing is we create a second root component in parallel to our standard app view. And we use Vue CLI as a standard generator. So this is heavily aligned to the Vue CLI style of doing things. Next to your second root component, you need the widgets.js, which initializes the second root component and renders it into the DOM. And the third step, you have to adapt your Webpack configuration, which will then pack everything together into the second output bundle. And at the end, we need a nice integration to our CMS so that our newsroom staff can use these widgets. In this separate widget app view, we first import all of our 67 components and then make them available in the template with the component meta component. And the interesting thing is, you can just specify as many properties you want next to the is property. And this will be just forwarded as normal property, as you know, from normal components to the replaced real component then. The script of our widget app is straightforward. Just specify a property with the component name, the area key, which will be forwarded, and again, export all components to the template so that it can be rendered. And we also import the global styles we need to display the graphs. And that's it for the widget app. Now we have to glue everything together in the widgets.js. At the top, we just take the current script tag, which is executed, and look for the data attributes on it. You can access the data attributes with .dataset. It's a standard DOM attribute. And this will be then used to render our widget app component. One of the maybe not so well-known things is that if you dynamically import modules, you have to rewrite the default exports to the correct variable name. So you have the correct names in the scope available. And one of the things we always do is at the beginning, before we render something, we load the required texts, which we need. For example, this is below the graphics, the information text, etc. We always load this at the beginning so that they are available as soon as possible during the render time. And then move on to the Webpack configuration, add the new entry point. So this is now the important step. We now have next to our standard app.js entry point, a second one for the widgets. And we don't want hashed file names. So this is a little dirty workaround. If the chunk ID is widgets, just don't add any hash and put everything into the widgets.js file. And if not, do like the Vue Webpack config is normally doing. And for our newsroom team, we have a special view of our single-page app. where they can just choose which components they want to embed. So for example, here the Austrian timelines, and then if they are working in, let's say, Landesstudio Wien, they can just choose the Wien as Bundeslandesstate. And they also get a nice preview with the real live data, so they can check if everything is like they expect. And you saw it a little bit earlier in Felix's presentation. They then just copy-paste it in the story editor, click on publish, and the thing goes live. And the nice thing then is that you don't have to deploy the single-page app in 9 different styles. The different Landesstudios can just create their own dashboards by using the widgets over and over again. And they get the same data, the same application as the standalone single-page application. So for example, this is in Niederösterreich, Lower Austria. They created their own dashboard with their own needs, with their own priorities. And this was really helpful if you have such a large number of people working in the newsroom, because you can control what they do if you have 200 people working on news every day. So if you want to check it out, just go to orf.at/corona. This is our info point. And if you click on data or on some of the buttons down here, you directly come to the single page application. I hope we don't need this in after summer, but I'm not very optimistic about it. So we will do a lot of optimizations during summer, especially in the data loading process, because 3 years of coronavirus data will be too much for old browsers. And we will have the easy solution will be freeze everything in the last 2 years and just load the data from 2022 and 23 then. And we are working on this during summer when we have time in a nice relaxed mode. So one of the problems you have in this is different to a lot of software engineering you do normally, that we really have to react on day-to-day news events. So it can happen that in 2 in the afternoon, they completely fuck up the data, which they did quite often, I have to say. And then you need a fix as soon as possible. And we talk about fixing complex stuff in the stack in 30 minutes and redeploy it so that the users don't get misinformation just because of wrong input data. And we also have now mechanisms in place to display huge warnings if something goes wrong. If you're interested in our geodata stack, we have a separate presentation given in Hagenberg around 1 or 2 months ago, where I and my colleague Günther Hack talk about OpenStreetMap, how we put up our whole OpenStreetMap stack and what you can do with if you have control over your geodata stack. Quite interesting things. And huge credit also to my colleague Simon, who did a lot of nice and interesting things in this coronavirus application, and I'm just here to talk about it. So Simon Oberhammer has a lot of credit in the interest in the complex stuff of this Vue application. So I hope it was interesting for you. And if you have any questions or feedback, I'm welcome for it.
Questions?
I'm wondering, have you tried making the dashboard accessible, for instance, to people who use screen readers? Because I tried it with the screen reader. It didn't quite work so well, but I understand it's really challenging to make something like that accessible. So I'm just wondering if there were any attempts or if you're working on anything.
Yeah, I tried at the beginning a little bit, so it was not, but the problem is graphing libraries like Plotly completely ignore accessibility. So the way which would be possible at the end would be to replace the infographic in the DOM with a fallback text, which then describes the data you see visually. But I haven't figured out a way which I would see as a very promising solution. The most important stuff for me is that the normal textual information, like the buttons you have at the top of the page, that they will be read out in a nice order, and that they are at least as accessible as possible. But the next problem are the maps. So maps, we use Leaflet, and we use Leaflet because it's pretty good accessible with keys, but the reading out the content would be the next problem. But we take really care about the colors in the maps, so that they are accessible and that you don't have problems with red, green. Color blindness. Thanks. So color blindness is definitely on our high priorities when we choose the colors, for example, because this is a quite low-hanging fruit for that, what you get for it.
All right, thank you.
More questions?
Hi, my name is Flo Weise. Thank you for the insights. That's always interesting. And I've got so many questions. So, of course, when you output the data, you do load balancing. That's necessary. But how do you scale when you input the data? And why did you choose Vue? I know it's from the developer experience, it's nice, but React would be more performant.
So the good thing is that the import is not very expensive. It's just 50 files or something like that, which update at fixed points of time every day. And if they don't come in this time frame, we know that something is not going in the right direction on this day. So if the Morgenmeldung is not here at 11 in the morning, we can be sure, 90% sure that something will break 2 hours later, or will be not as we expect. And then the good thing is we now have a Slack channel, especially for this product. And we have a bot in there, and the bot will just say there is something suspicious or something is not going as expected, and then I can directly talk to my colleague from the new, who is a journalist, and who will then do the journalistic side, and me and my colleagues will react on the technical stuff. And it's not so problematic if a script runs for. So the vaccination script runs around 10 minutes. It's quite a long time because it's doing a lot of transformations and reprocessings and checks. The checks are the most expensive thing because I even check if the sums are increasing and are the right sums from day to day in the timelines. Because we had days where the sums decreased and I was like, what's going on there? So this is the check scripts with the scripts with the most brain power. That's the import part. And as I said before, DNS round robin is really, really solid if you just have static files and if you host your own hardware. And the second question was, Vue, by Vue. We had to decide the new standard framework for us when we discovered that Backbone and Marionette is not the way to go. And we had an Angular team working with Angular and one team with the Marionette parts. And the Marionette and Backbone people decided to go on with Vue because it fitted more our approach. It was not a pure technical decision. And the Angular team, I think, now also uses Vue for a lot of stuff, but I'm not sure. We have not this company-wide one thing only policy. So we still have a lot of sometimes I had to fix some Marionette and Backbone stuff last year, so fires back. if you have long running products. Yeah, but it was more a decision because we like the approach of Vue, and it was not so heavy because you can just put in the Vue the script tag and use it to make sites interactive. It's looked more lightweight than jumping on the React train back then.
Thanks. One last question. Do you use NoSQL databases or SQL databases?
Yeah, we have Postgres as central database. We migrated from Oracle away to Postgres.
Away from where?
Oracle. And now our central database is Postgres, and we are very happy with it. We don't have... The good thing about Postgres is now with the JSON data types, you can go pretty far with our stack. So we don't really need a schemaless or NoSQL database. Also because we are not having heavily write-intensive applications. So just imagine how many journalists you can have. This is a number which will not exceed 1,000 people in parallel in Austria at ORF. So this is easy to handle, but we have extremely sophisticated caching on the output side. And we have at least 4 levels of caching before a user sees a page. So that's where the brain power goes in.
Thanks.
1 or 2 last questions?
So I saw that you used direct importing components in the widgets.js file. Why didn't you use dynamic importing components in that file?
You could, but it's a little bit about editor support in our case. So we wanted to have ensured that nothing, it's a little comfort in the editor. As I said before, it's not all the time about making the perfect decision from an engineering point of view, but it started with 3 or 4 components, then it grew and grew and grew and grew. And at the end, it's just, it's easy to edit with an IDE support. So that's why we don't have dynamics configured with some files or so, this part.
The drawback now is that when you're loading one single widget, you're loading the whole bundle.
Yeah, but we want to have this, and that's the reason why we want to have this actually is that if we have it in the user cache and a second widget comes on the next page, then it's already there, and we want to save a little bit more on the request side than on the making the bundle as small as possible, because we also see a very high cache hit rate in the users' browsers. That's the reason.
Okay, thanks.
I think we have to cut it short there, but maybe Philip can be available afterward for questions as well.
Sure.
So thanks again, Philip.
Good evening. My name is Lars. I make software. So if you don't understand something, then I will repeat it immediately or explain something. Otherwise, questions at the end, please. Okay, I have my timer. So abstract, you have seen this already on the meetup page, HTTP client, blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's skip this. So target audience. This is for people who implement web-based services, either front-end or back-end. Who feels belonging to this group? Show of hands. Almost everyone. Almost everyone. Nice. I hope you can learn something today. So about the software I'm going to show you. This is hacked together just for myself. So there's no documentation. And it looks really janky, but it works. And that in the end, this is what matters to me, providing the convenience that other tools do not. Demonstration. Okay, what I'm going to show you is, as the heading of the talk was saying, a client, but a client alone cannot work. So there's also a demonstration part of the server software, but that's not the important part. I'm using example database. It's called Chinook, and you've seen this probably before because this is one of those sample databases. And if you want to try out new database stuff, and then you start with a database, but it's empty. This is one of the samples you can find anywhere, load it up in your database and get up and running. So what's the point of this data set? It represents a digital media store. So there are customers who buy audio files. Audio files are organized in albums and playlists. Payments for these files are tracked in invoices, and customers have support representatives working for this namesake company. So this is what it looks like. So a small browser running in the browser. Now, what can I do? So you see the interface is quite similar to other HTTP clients which are used by programmers. Yeah, let's fetch a resource. So here are the request headers. Here's the HTTP status code, response headers, response body. So far, so good. What's different? Well, you can see already I've underlined some things here. It says, if it's too small, it says change request method. It says here, change request method media type. And also here in the body, hyperlinks are underlined. If I click on one, it will automatically follow this link. For example, artist is the collection of all artists in this data set. Now, let's have a look at the overall structure first. You can see this is a derivative of JSON. So we have a normal JSON object, which can be deserialized with any JSON-compliant library. But there's also some other things. This is the HAL part. So you can see this in a semantic extension of JSON. And the interesting part is, of course, what JSON does not have, hyperlinks. And these are collected here, prefixed with an underscore. This is a widely implemented convention for, yeah, this one is private. So it does not accidentally collide if you already have a data object which contains the contains a key named links. Yeah, so you can see the answer is quite big, 59 kilobytes. So let's skip it to the end, skip over all the links for the artists and have a look what it looks like at the end. So there's always a self link, and this one I will talk about later. Now, if I click on a link, I will follow the link, and you can see this has changed. And I will, of course, get the same answer because it's the same resource, logically. Now, what I can do is click here, and then, before I do that, this is just plain HTTP, so we cannot load it in the browser itself. And I've installed an extension that can deal with JSON. So if I'm not happy with all the outputted ones, I can, collapse it here in this browser extension. This is a bit easier to deal with. Now that I have this already in the browser, I do not need to duplicate the functionality in my client. But this just as an aside. Now we want to follow one of these item links contained under the item key here, and pick this one. You see this is not clickable, but this is. So follow this one. And now we will see we have an item, not the collection anymore. One single artist. Here's its name. And we can see, of course, this artist has 2 albums. We can go back to the collection. We can go back to the start page. We know what media type this is. What's the link for the current resource? Why is this useful, a self-link? Yeah, if you take the resource out of its HTTP context, then the URI will not be available anymore. For example, you save the file to disk. Then you still have the original URI contained here, logically. And profile says, well, we are not using raw HAL because this one has no semantic information, but we want to express that this resource is an artist. Yeah, and let's go further. Here's an album, a backlink to the artist. The album has tracks. Let's pick a track, that one. And now we can see what's available in a track, a certain number of size, length, who composed it, the name. If we are selling the track, what's its price? This track belongs to this album, to this genre. Invoice lines I will talk about last. Media type, MPEG audio file, playlist contained in these playlists, blah, blah, blah. Not so interesting. Invoice line represents, if you have an invoice and a bill of a sales bill, it will be one item or position on the invoice. And this was purchased once for this price. Here's the track again. Again, this is a backlink. And this invoice line belongs to this invoice. And this track was purchased by Mr. Stereotype here, who is a customer who has this invoice. And the invoice has 4 lines, 4 items. So each one 0.99 makes 4 files for this total. So this checks out. And here's the details for the customer. Again, we're just reading all this data and try to get the feel how the resources are relating to each other. This is browsing, as you know it, as you've done already tens of thousands of times. So Mr. Hansen here has a number of invoices. He is quite a prolific customer. And this customer is also associated with an employee. So this employee here, Margaret Park, is the support representative for this employee. We can click here. So this is the employee resource, Margaret resource. And we can see she supports quite a lot of customers. Here, Björn Hansen at the top. And she also has a manager who is another employee. So you can see I do not need to name the relation like the hyperlink says or what the profile says. I can make up my own identifier, which is useful because Sometimes it can happen that a resource links to itself multiple times. For example, Margaret was the support representative and she has a manager, Nancy. And Nancy sits in the middle. She supervises a number of sales representatives, but she also has her own manager, Andrew. If we click here, okay, Andrew is the general manager. He just supervises, but has no supervisor. Yeah.
You said we could ask questions if something is unclear.
Yes.
Is underscore links, is this a convention that is defined by HAL, or is this?
It's not a convention. It's even stronger than that. It's
built-in relation.
Not a relation. This key is prescribed by the standard, or mandated.
So when you have a HAL standard,
yes,
and with JSON as a display,
mm-hmm,
or as a UI in a sense, then you have to follow those standards to be valid.
Exactly. And if you do not follow the standards, then you will suffer the consequences, which are.
You don't want to do that.
No.
Okay, so links is a standard, and then there's the own current where you are, for example.
Yeah, there are two more reserved words. One is embedded, which is used for caching. I'm not going to talk about this at all because I haven't implemented it. And the other one you have seen already, scroll down at the end, it says underscore templates, and I will talk about this later.
Okay.
So links is the important one. You can see what this is useful for. Hyperlinks, of course. So back to the slides. So now you have seen what HAL looks like roughly. I mean, there's more to it, but that's the important part, the gist. And you could see how I just easily browse through the data and get from resource to resource, from collections to items. So second demo. Now let's, reading is boring. Let's do some write operations. New customer. Yes?
Why do we need fancy UIs when we have this? Well,
Good question.
Yeah. What do you mean with fancy UIs?
yeah, we have React, Vue. Why can't we show the data?
Yeah, that's the idea. In production, you would not use. You see, this is a development tool intended for developers. If you intend to show something to end users, then you would use one of the frameworks you mentioned, and they would use this underlying HTTP interface. Now, of course, you first have to develop the application in React or what have you. And this is where this tool comes in. It helps you. It helps you get an overview. It helps you smoke out errors. And if you're on the back end, it helps you plan ahead and think about how to represent your data scheme in a resource-oriented fashion. So it checks out. That's the point of it.
ViennaJS not very backend.
Yeah.
JavaScript is not just in the front. But
I'm already.
Let's just go to the beginning again. This means home. Artist, okay. Album, track. Invoice line. Invoice. Customer. Okay, one customer, and in the end, there is the collection and resource. So this represents all customers. You can see the difference here. Under this relation, there's an array with all the stuff, and an item resource is only a single one. Okay. Now we want to do create a new subordinate resource of the customer resource. So in plain English, make a new customer. And I can click here. It says change request method and media type. So you will see this changes and this changes. If I click here, so it changed from get to post. It added a content type header, application JSON. Now I could, if I want to, put my new customer in JSON format here, which is error prone. and not fun at all. So what I can do is instead click this magic button, fill form here, and then I will be asked some questions. Address, okay. City, company, empty, country, let's make capital C, email, fax, first name F, last name L, phone, postal code, state, and it's filled in. So you can see this is the moral equivalent of a form. You know, HTML and XML have forms. When you use HAL, as I do here, JSON also has forms. So now I can click submit, and the server will reply 201 created, location is here. A normal browser will automatically redirect when it sees a location header. I have to click manually here. And now we have a new customer. So there's a new URI. Here are the data for the customer as I have entered them. And it has, of course, all the additional HAL trappings here. And as the collection header accept post header, an item has an accept patch header. I can click here again. It will change here. This is just repeated from the last time. I will clear this up. I can again use the magic fill form button, AA, CC, company, MP, country, email, fax, last, phone, postal code, state. And the patch request, if you've seen this one is able to modify a resource piecemeal, which is of course convenient with JSON because it consists of a JSON object consists of top-level keys. This is usually how you would represent your resource. Now I do not want to change everything. You see, I did it on purpose in these two steps, so I can always look over what I've entered there. If I made a mistake, I can fix it now. And I will just change the country and overwrite it here. Submit, patch. Okay, this changed, you see? And let's go again to the self link. Get the new resource. It really changed. Okay. What else is possible? I can use put, which overwrites the resource as a whole. I will clear this up again. Fill form. And country was 2 Cs. Let's make 3 Cs. Email, fax, first name, last name. So really janky. I mean, I could make, of course, a form which is not a series of questions, but you know, a dialogue with many form fields, one under the other. But this works. It works for me. Good enough. And let's say put, and then it will overwrite this resource. Did it work? No. The server said I made a boo-boo. I made an error. Series 400 means client error. Series 500 means server error. So what's my mistake? As it says here, unsupported media type. I still had the old content type here from the patch request. It must be application JSON. Now it should work. Okay. Okay. Yes. And what else is there? We still have a number of unused, what's it called? Request methods. Links. Yes. This customer is new, but it still needs a support representative. Now, I delete this header. Let's make a new one. Link, and suppose I could go back to the list of, yeah, let's do that. To the list of employees and pick one of them. Not link, that's wrong, get. That's my problem here. This works, okay. Apparently I'm out of time already. So let's pick this one representative. Go back to the old resource. What's the point of the link request method? This is used to associate or relate one resource to the other. So then we also need a link request header. Put in the URI here and add relation equals, what was it called? One rel support rep and closing quotation mark. Everything okay? No, I made the mistake. Where's the mistake? Perhaps this one. No. Sorry, this is not foreseen. And let's go back to the slides. So, well, 3 out of 4, that ain't bad. Yes, quotation mark. Let's have a look. Yeah, looks okay. I don't know what I did wrong. So now compare this with other HTTP clients, which you probably have used for the purposes I talked with this dude about. At no point I constructed a URI. You know, the server always gave me URIs to follow. I didn't enter any URI except the one at the beginning, which is the entry point. And I did not need to look up any JSON schemas, service descriptions, or crap like that, because the server told my user agent what's possible. Yeah. So the hypermedia controls, Vulgo, links, forms, made that possible. And this is true REST. Do not be deceived by web authoring systems which say, yeah, we're RESTful, but you can't find a single hyperlink anywhere. That's not REST. So if you do not traverse your application state through hypermedia controls by following links, by submitting forms, then you're doing it wrong. And it's not REST. It's HTTP, but not REST, because this one adds additional constraints on top. So in comparison to other clients, I've mentioned XH, a popular command line client, Firecamp, and dozens of similar graphical user interfaces. But you cannot do what I just demonstrated. If there's a hyperlink, you cannot click it to follow it. You have to copy paste it, put it back in the URI bar, and submit again. Very tedious. I mean, I've done this before on the command line with XH, but then I said enough. Yeah? I'm not happy with that, so I wrote this client, and now I can. Well, I don't have saved time, but I feel happier, and that's much more important. A big motivation. Yeah. So future outlook. What can we add to the client? There's a header called prefer that's used for. You can tell the server if I make for example, a put request. Either I would prefer to get the full modified answer again, so I can use it, or the server, or I can tell for the server to answer with a 204 status code, which has no request response body, and you will then get the new request manually again. So server support for caching and rejecting lost updates. Caching is one prerequisite for the lost update problem. So what does it mean? This is a concurrency problem. For example, you have client A, you have client B independently, yeah? And they fetch a resource, get, so they get both at the same time. Then client A, sometime later, puts its changes. Then client B puts its changes and overwrites the one made by A. So this is the lost update. But if you use a strong identifier associated with a resource, in this case, the header E tag is used, then you can make a conditional put request. I think the header is called if none match. Does anyone know? Probably not. And then the request, put request, the conditional put request of client B would fail because the server then will say, you do not have, you have a stale copy. You have to first fetch a new one, reapply your changes, then write. Yeah, what else can I do? Range header. Range header, you probably know for large HTTP downloads, you can resume in the middle, and it says bytes, blah, 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 blah. And you can also make up your own units, not only bytes. You can say items, and then fetch the artist list of artists in the collection, but you will get only, let's say, 10 or 20 at once, and then paginate through the resources, which is friendlier on the server and does not cause as much throughput, because rarely you need everything in a collection. So I also want to give a follow-up talk. You see this server-side demo up is a poor example for a web service. We only did some data editing, but I want to show the design of a proper full-fledged resource-oriented web service. So if you have an idea which I can implement, and chat with me after the talk. And your takeaway for today, if you cannot find an appropriate tool, you're allowed to write your own. Do this. Read the RFCs. There's so much good stuff. I can heartily recommend this website, webconcepts.info. You get an overview of all the HTTP methods, request methods, the status codes, the media types, link relations. What else? Yeah, so much stuff there. And if you want to go deep into the details, I can recommend this book, RESTful Web APIs, available from O'Reilly. Bonus slides, no time. So I blasted through everything. Please give me your questions and comments.
Let's start with the first one.
Yeah.
Is it open source, and how did you make the client? What programming language or stack or whatever?
Okay. Is it open source? No, but I intend to upload it to GitHub, and I can share it under free software license. And how is it made? Well, let's have a look at the code. Where's the code? Here's the code. So altogether, this whole janky thing is 300 lines of code.
Oh.
Yeah. The whole client, not the server, just the client.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, 20 of which are 20 lines of CSS, about 60 lines of HTML, and then the rest is, what is it made in? This will excite you.
Nice. That's the link back to your comment on that's front end and back end. There is JavaScript in what is demonstrated. We just didn't see the code until now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is the whole magic here. I'm just using fetch. And the rest is content mangling, which I am doing with evil regular expressions, because they're they're like a forbidden fruit for me.
Is there, so can I disclose
Yes,
your
yes.
main programming language?
Yes, please out me.
Any questions? His preferred programming language versus what he's done most professionally. When you see the regex is there. Perl. Yes, correct. Perl. Yes.
Other questions? Yes.
So the backend system, in what language have you made that?
We've already said that.
Perl.
I have a serious question.
Yes.
The form data. So you had the steps for the form. How did you know which fields are available?
Yeah, that's what I forgot to say at the end. This is the magic here. So this is the information from which a form can be built on the client side. So as I said, compare this with forms in HTML. Also, the server provides you everything. You have a form element with input fields and so on and so on. This is the moral equivalent in JSON, not JSON proper, because it doesn't have it, but HAL and HAL forms add this capability to JSON and make it an equal citizen to other hypermedia formats in the eyes of web developers. Yes, you?
Would this also support other data types than just strings?
Would this support other data types than just strings? Yes, it would, but I have not implemented this in my client. If you look at the corresponding RFC, it has a lot of additional keys here under properties where you can restrict it and use quite similar ideas. Quite similar ideas. What's also provided in HTML5 forms. So I've seen some numeric restrictions useful for numeric input sliders, regex validations, which can be used for almost everything, like email, like you said, and so on and so on. More? Yes?
Are there clients available where I could fetch the resource and also some where I can say populate this and this and this link from the resource?
You mean for the link request header?
No, I want to do a get request on the resource and also say I want there are also links.
Yes.
Also in the same request, or not in the request, but that the client would also support to fetch the other link resources and provide them to me. Probably not your client, but other clients.
Other clients could, yes. Clients are allowed to do anything in the constraints of HTTP. If they want to automatically follow a link, like it's useful after 300 something status code, after a location header, or for let's take another example. A traditional web browser has sees link rel equal style in the HTML head portion, right? It will fetch this automatically because it knows style is a relation relating that style sheet to this document, and it fetches it automatically. Same with images. So if you have a client which wants to automatically fetch resources, it can do that, and that if the relation allows it, it also should do that.
One last question?
Yeah.
Then thanks again.
Yeah.